Welcome to my channel, INTJ Island. Today, I'm going to take an INTJ look at She by H. Rider Haggard. It was published in 1886, and I will share my thoughts on the book. I should warn you that though I will not give all the details of the story, there are enough spoilers here that you might prefer to read the book first. However, having read the book more than once myself, even knowing how it ends in general does not take away from the pathos of the story, nor does it detract from the depth of thought that Haggard put into the concepts contained in the story. You'll find the philosophical thoughts that Haggard has the leading protagonist expounding upon to be of interest, I am sure. Even when you feel he has gone astray in his thinking, the path he takes is of interest. This is just one of the reasons that reading is so much better than watching a movie. You have time to engage in the story and with the characters in a very personal and deep way. You can pause and think over what you just read. There's a great deal of material in She, which I felt was worth my time to consider. I should mention that H. Rider Haggard wrote 3 other books where the character Ayesha, or She Who Must Be Obeyed, has a part, and one of them is written from her perspective. I have the books in hand, but I have not yet read them, so I will only be discussing what is in the original book. If I find the other books to be of interest, I will perhaps discuss them in other videos. As the Halloween season is coming towards us, I have a number of seasonal books that I like to reread, and this year I added She to that list. It is a multifaceted story that could be classified as fantasy or perhaps science fiction. It is at its heart a romance, a love story that covers more than 2,000 years. It has many philosophical insights, but when I was finished with the book, the reason I have included it in my Halloween list is that I felt a horror that went clear to my bones. The book pulls together the real human drives that lie beneath the conscious mind and move us where they will, to happiness or misery, and perhaps even to death and destruction. I first read She when I was a young father, perhaps 21 years old. It was in the early 1970s. I read it again about a decade ago and have just finished it once again the past few days. It is funny how I have done this with many books, where the first time I read the story, the protagonist seemed quite old, and then, as the years go by, he appears younger and younger. Ludwig Horace Holly, the primary protagonist in She, is in his 40s. At age 21, that seemed old. However, today, at age 67, that seems quite young. Perspective changes with motion, and time is always moving. One of the things that authors must strive for, and sometimes struggle with, is consistency. C.S. Lewis, in his Out of the Silent Planet, wrote that the protagonist's name had been altered to keep you from being able to identify him. Then later, in Perelandra, the second book in that fascinating series, he made a point of how that supposedly artificial name, which had been used to hide the real identity, now held a very deep significance to the role he was going to play in that story. It is not his name, according to Book 1, but it is very significant that it was his name in Book 2. There are a lot of details to keep track of when you write a series of books, and there are INTJs out there who automatically will pick up on your goofs. We have a similar occurrence in this book, where the fictitious editor of the document noted that the name L. Horace Holly was buried throughout the document in accordance with the writer's request. Then later on, in a conversation with Ayesha, normally referred to as She Who Must Be Obeyed, Holly pointed out that his name referred to a prickly plant, indicating the holly plant. At the heart of the tale is a 2,000-year-old grudge. A set of fantastic occurrences brought together 3 people around 300 BC that set off this amazing story. And the story that was carried down to the present was composed at the time by one of the 3 parties involved, one Amenartis, who was a member of the house of the pharaohs of Egypt, and who had married a priest of Isis, one Callicrates, who broke his vows to Isis and fled Egypt with his wife and headed south along the eastern coast of Africa. Just north of the mouth of the Zambezi River, they were shipwrecked and made their way to the land of Kor, an ancient civilization that had been wiped out by plague thousands of years before. The people who remained had fallen into savagery, and they lived in the Haggard tribe, and they were ruled by a queen known only as she who must be obeyed. The queen, along with Amitardus and Callicrates, combined to make up a trio whose actions created an undying love, an undying hatred, and the 2,000-year-old grudge that was to create the drama that unfolded in the story. Ayesha, the queen, fell in love with Callicrates and tried to win his heart away from Amitardus. Both women had powers from their training in sorcery, and in the climax of the struggle, Ayesha entered the flame of life, which made her indestructible. She implored Callicrates to come in with her, but he instead turned in love to his wife, and Ayesha, in anger, slew him. However, she immediately and ever thereafter regretted the impulsive action. There stood the two women, hating each other over the dead body of Callicrates. In normal circumstances, it would be a sordid mess, hardly uncommon, that would have faded into the forgotten past as all of them died and turned to dust. How many similar stories could be told if time had not erased their memory? But these were not normal circumstances, and hence the tale began. Amitardus was too powerful in magic to be slain, and Ayesha had to be content in driving her out of her kingdom. However, Amitardus was carrying Callicrates' son. Ayesha, on the other hand, retained Callicrates' body, had it embalmed perfectly, and she grieved her actions and suffered his loss deeply and horribly every day for over 2,000 years. Meanwhile, Amitardus had written the events down, and in the document she charged her descendants to go back and right the wrong that was done to Callicrates, and to take vengeance upon Ayesha, with the added suggestion that the avenger could then walk into the fire of life and live without death. The writing was passed down, generation after generation, through the centuries. Some had tried to follow her quest, but the hazards were many, and none had succeeded. But finally, the task fell to Leo Vinci, a descendant of Callicrates and Amitardus, and as it turned out, he was the spitting image of the man both women had loved. Horace Hawley had raised Leo Vinci from childhood, when he was asked to do so by Leo's father on the day the man had died. At that time, he was given a chest with all the artifacts that led to the quest, and was told to hand it over to Leo on his 25th birthday. Therein the chest was the story and enough information to begin the quest. Leo took up the charge, and so Hawley, Leo, and their servant Job all set off for Africa from England. In the end, they found the landmarks mentioned in the documents from the chest, and they located the path to their destination. But they would have doubtlessly died on the trek had not the people of She Who Must Be Obeyed come to port them to their land. The swamps, the mosquitoes, and the barbaric customs of the people were all horrible enough. But for me, what was most troubling were the ruins that they encountered. Here was an advanced race of people who had built canals, roads, and structures that had stood for thousands of years and still looked majestic. An educated people, a proud people, who had done many marvelous works, were utterly destroyed by plague. The civilization was lost, and all that remained were the ruins and the caves filled with perfectly preserved corpses. Babylon is dust, and the mighty pyramids have crumbled for thousands of years. Rome's Colosseum and Greece's stone columns all speak of civilizations forever gone. Such were the ruins of Kor, that were ancient before Ayesha came to dwell and rule over the land for over 2,000 years. Ayesha claimed that her Callicrates would return, be reborn as we are all reborn. She was waiting for him to reappear. When she laid eyes upon Leo, she was swept by emotion, and when she spoke, she didn't call him Leo. She called him Callicrates, and later she led Horace and Leo down to the preserved body of Callicrates, and Leo in horror felt like he was looking into a mirror. The reason I view this as a horror story is because the tale combines elements of horrible contemporary events with a long history of misery and the state of affairs at the conclusion where no one is left truly happy. Ayesha read aloud as she translated the writings of a citizen of Kor who was one of the last to die, as he described the horror that was consuming his people, all of them, the men, women, and children, stricken into extinction by the plague. The bulk of the book's story was indeed set upon the ruins of this civilization, with their mummified remains to be seen at every turn. Long after Kor was no more, Aminartis lost her husband at the hand of Ayesha, who ironically lost her love because she slew him. Horace Hawley was in his 40s, ugly though strong, learned, but one who had lost it love long ago, and save for Leo, he was alone in life, and prepared to remain so. Their servant Job was uncomfortable at best and terrified at other times, and in the end fell to his premonitions when his heart was stopped by fear. Leo was a Greek god in appearance and never wanted for the attention of ladies. In fact, upon arriving in Ayesha's land, Ustane, a local girl, proposed marriage by kissing him, and he accepted unknowingly, thinking she was just being friendly, by kissing her back. However, after he realized what had happened, he took the lovely girl to wife, in his heart, despite the confusion. Later, she came between Leo and Ayesha, and refused to obey the command of she who must be obeyed, to depart and leave Leo to the powerful queen. As always, Ayesha reacted badly in the end, and struck poor, loyal Ustane dead, but not before Ustane pronounced a curse upon Ayesha, that she who must be obeyed would not in the end enjoy having Leo unto herself. It must be noted that Ayesha gave Ustane many chances to change her mind and to leave, but alas, Ustane's love was as strong as Ayesha's, and she chose to die rather than to give up her man. In the end, the curse of Ustane, whether by force of the power of her curse or mere coincidence, came to pass just as she had said it. Another permanent injury in the story was caused by Ayesha's superhuman beauty. In public, she draped herself in cloth, covering her body from head to toe, so no man could see her face or her flesh. For to see her was to fall forever in love, as both Horace Hawley and Leo Vinci were to find out, to their harm. For the rest of their lives, they were both filled with love and desire for Ayesha. In a normal lifespan, we go through our days, and we have goals and accomplishments. We compile a series of things to look back on that we have done, and we can say, I did these things in my life. But Ayesha appeared to have only one accomplishment for 2,000 years of life, retaining a burning, overpowering love for Callicrates, coupled with an eternal hatred for Aminartis for standing in the way of her own love. In a way, it was as if she had never lived, other than keeping the people she ruled over in abject terror for their lives. She was known only to the people as she who must be obeyed, and by no other name. She had many of the characteristics of a narcissist. She was only focused on herself and her desires. She slew people upon a whim. She, in point of fact, killed the man she supposedly loved unreservedly. She lamented his death for over 2,000 years after the fact, but she had no hesitation in taking his life in the first place when she was angry. It appeared to me that it was not Callicrates himself that she loved at all. It was the image of possessing him for her own that she loved, and that was lost. When Leo appeared, apparently Callicrates had returned, even though he had no memory of her. He was in no way the same man, other than in appearance. It might as well have been Callicrates' twin brother, who looked exactly the same, and so, in her mind, he was the same man. A narcissist is never truly happy, and she who must be obeyed was not happy. It so happened that she felt that her goals were about to be fulfilled, especially when Leo and she went through a marriage ceremony, and they each vowed their love and eternal devotion to one another. Finally, she was certain of obtaining her long-lived desire. But alas, even this was not to be. Instead, she who must be obeyed fell in aged ruin, struck down by the same force that had given her such long life. And all she left behind were two men who were madly in love with her and would be for the rest of their lives. To the people she had ruled over, she only left behind the title she bore to them. They remembered their fear of her and nothing else. Ayesha was no more. A 2,000-year-old grudge against her was settled, and as it turned out, by her own actions. What if she had not died? Their desire was so great that had the conditions allowed it, Horus and Leo may well have fought over her and perhaps slain each other, even as close as they were. They wanted her more than life itself, and any price would be worth paying in order to possess this goddess of the flame. Fortunately for them, such a battle never occurred, for even while Ayesha lived, Horus knew she only loved Leo, and Holly could never possess this woman of devastating beauty. Indeed, was her end not a blessing to Ayesha herself? To finally be rid of the horrible pain of destroying that which she desired? Every night she writhed in agony as she begged the body of Callicrates to forgive her, in between the curses she pronounced against the woman who would not give up her husband. The nightly ritual was described in the book as being a soul in hell. What price is long life if you live it every day in misery? Was it not better for her to be done with it? Had she died at the end of a normal lifespan, she would have been saved hundreds of thousands, approaching even 1,000,000 nights of agony and self-torture. Over the thousands of years of walking down the steps to Callicrates' tomb, her sandals had worn the hard, unyielding stone down by several inches. Even with all her power and her beauty, she lived in exquisite misery, which drained all her happiness away. And had she been joined with Leo, and she finally got her wish, what then? She spoke of going out into the world to rule it. But to what end? No matter what fell into her hands, she would never be satisfied. A narcissist is never happy, cannot be happy. The original letter to Leo from his father told him that he had the choice of either making the quest or destroying the artifacts completely and putting the family charge to rest forever. What if he had done that? He would have lived out his normal life, and in the end he would have died. Ayesha would have continued to live and wait in anticipation of the future return of her lover, as she nightly tortured herself in misery over what she had done. It was madness, and it was going to go on and on. There is something about this story that keeps pulling my mind back to it, to mull it over. I can feel my intuition working at it, trying to figure it out, to put it into a pattern that makes sense to me. I find myself returning to the story, but then I realize that my mind had been working at it even as I was busy elsewhere. What of the people of Kor? What of their small number of descendants who had returned to a primitive and barbaric existence? Naturally, as intuition always does, it leads my mind to questions like, does it matter that the Egyptians built the pyramids, or that we build skyscrapers today? How horrible might immortality truly be? And if I could find the flame of life, would I venture into it? And then there's the image of she, the woman so beautiful that to see her is to desire her passionately forever. She who is forever young, forever beautiful, and forever out of reach. Did Horace Holly and Leo Vinci ever have a day of peace after seeing that form? What is horror? What is horrible? I can say truly, I felt horror many times as I read this book. A great and civilized people brought to nothing by a disease. A barbaric people who heated up metal pots red hot in the fire and then put them over the heads of their victims before they ate them. They carried burning mummies in parades of celebration as they danced. A woman so powerful that she could strike people dead at her whim and had no qualms about doing so, racked by the horror that her narcissistic impulses had killed the only man she ever desired, as she lived out millennia without aging or having her pain diminished in the slightest. To her, life was a curse. Love or desire or whatever it was in her heart tortured her doubly as she writhed in agony, driven by a desire for forgiveness from the dead body of Callicrates lying before her on a stone slab, and knowing he was not hers to have and to hold because she had slain him. She was filled with hatred and jealousy for Aminardus, keeping her memory alive in her curses, and by the power of her hatred for her long-dead rival. If you for a time push the I believe button and take the story as though it were real, it could keep you up at night thinking about it. It's done that to me. If you enjoyed the video, please click like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll see you next time.